Nothing says I love you like a Nintendo Switch Online announcement, and this year, Nintendo has your perfect suitor in mind. Too bad he's a greedy, selfish treasure hunter named Wario. That's right, Nintendo is celebrating Valentine's Day by giving their subscribers Wario Land 4 on the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, that's cool news. But is this game actually worth playing? To answer that question, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, Game Informer, Advance, and more classic magazines to see what the critics said back when this game first came out. Brace yourself for heartache because it's time for a very romantic episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew.
Attention shoppers, we don't like you. We like your money, but not you. If you find us to be rude, selfish, and greedy, thank you. Enjoy your shopping.
Not fire, not ice, not even a bumblebee can impede the greed in Wario Land 4, only for Game Boy Advance.
Rated for everyone.
Super Mario Land is one of the rare hero-driven franchises where the antagonist ended up stealing the series and making it all about himself. After two popular but flawed Mario Land games, Nintendo decided to shake things up and center the third game in the series on the thieving Wario. This led to one of the best Virtual Boy games, as well as multiple Wario Land sequels on the Game Boy Color. In fact, the series performed so well under Wario's reign that in 2001, Nintendo decided to position the fourth installment as one of the first must-own titles for their fledgling Game Boy Advance. Wario Land 4 was a massive hit with the fans, but were the critics as open to welcoming this obnoxious criminal into their homes? Let's find out. When it comes to Electronic Gaming Monthly, the critics weren't having any of Wario's crap. Jonathan gave the game a score of 7 out of 10, complaining that even the instruction manual to Wario Land 4 admits that this is pretty much the same game as its predecessors. If you haven't sampled Wario's 1 through 3 on the Game Boy, the idea is basically 2D platform gameplay with a lot of block breaking and the occasional puzzles. The most entertaining part is utilizing the different abilities Wario gains, from interacting with certain enemies to get through barriers or find new areas. It's a very cool gameplay element. Despite its patented formula, the main game gets pretty repetitive after a while, so you'll definitely want to break off and try the novel minigames. Chris liked it a little bit more, giving it a 7.5. Personally, I like a little puzzle solving in my action games, so the Wario series is one of my faves. The fourth installment is fun, but sadly isn't much different from the last one, including some surprisingly similar looking levels. It does have a couple of new gameplay elements, like a life meter, a timer you set off to start a race back to the beginning of each level, and 3 new minigames. And as dark as the Game Boy Advance screen is, the graphics look bright and crisp. Great fun, but doesn't stray too far from the series' tried and true formula. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave Wario Land 4 an average score of 7.5 out of 10. Now, believe it or not, this score from EGM is actually the lowest of any English language magazine. The next highest score comes from Nintendo Power, who settled on a straight 4 out of 5 rating. Game Informer went a bit higher, giving this early generation Game Boy Advance game a solid score of 8.25 out of 10. Andy complained that it's nothing new to the Wario Land enthusiast, but it's enjoyable nonetheless. If you want platforming on the go, then you just can't go wrong with Wario Land 4. The magazine's second opinion review came from Rainer, who argued that the name of the game says it all. This is the fourth Wario Land adventure, and little has changed since the first entry in the series. Honestly though, I wouldn't want it any other way. The platforming challenges scream Super Mario World, and a wealth of secrets reside in each stage. Side-scrolling platformers are a rare commodity these days, but Wario Land 4 fills that void nicely. Moving up the scale, we see Advance Magazine giving the sequel a 90% in their very first issue. This is in line with the 4.5 out of 5 score that we got from GamePro, who gushed about the stage designs. Each level is imaginatively designed and packed with a variety of traps, enemies, secret passages, and deadly obstacles that'll keep your thumbs and your brain reeling. A rich and varied musical score, complete with real vocals and fun mini-games, will delight those who thought they'd have to wait until next year's Super Mario Advance 2 for a phenomenal 2D platform adventure on the Game Boy Advance. While the critics were quick to point out the game's many problems, the general consensus was positive. The overall average is 84%, which is lower than many of Mario's adventures, but also well within the acceptable range for a 2D platformer. You should definitely give this one a play, as the first Game Boy Advance game of 2025 is a real winner.
Game Boy Advance.
敵にやられて謎を解く出口はどこだ出口はどこだ出口はどこだスリルいっぱい大脱出今度のワリオは行きと帰りで2倍楽しいワリオランドアドバンス
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you'll be happy to know that we post new episodes just like this every time Nintendo adds classic games to their online service. In fact, we have a whole playlist where we look at every single game that is part of the Nintendo Switch Online. Give it a binge this weekend. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Wario game? Also, does it annoy you that Nintendo has avoided releasing some of the earlier Wario Land games, especially the first two? Let me see your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we're going to be back early next week with a completely different review crew episode looking at the recently released Accolade Sports Collection. Believe it or not, I actually had this thing done and ready to go, but then Nintendo went ahead and announced Wario Land 4. It's a massive, epic episode, and we're going to dive into it next week. While I wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,